All right, so we're back in onlinepython.com. We just want to look at a couple of things. One is how to write the structure of these statements. And then two, I want to talk a little bit about what maybe some questions might be on the exam related to these instances here. So first off, you are comparing x against 5 right here. If x is equal to 5, this is your Boolean expression, right? This is your condition. But before you can compare this variable x, you have to define the x variable in some way. If you left this off, then when you run the code, you're going to get an error. And it says name x is not defined. Now we're going to talk about all the potential errors and what they say and what they mean in another video. But for the general concept, if it ever says some value is not defined, that just means that you haven't told it what the value of the variable is. So in this case now, I've told it the value of x is 5, and I'm evaluating, does x equal 5? When it's true, we're going to print x is equal to 5. If it's not equal to 5, if this is false, then it's going to evaluate and say, well, does it equal 4? And if it does, it's going to print x is equal to 4. But if it's not 5 or 4, then it's going to print x does not equal 4 or 5. So we can now run this. I have an error already. I made a mistake in my while loop here. We'll have to deal with that in just a second. So we'll comment that out. Oops. Come all the way down. Alright, so now that's commented out. If we run it, we'll see that x is equal to 5. This is pretty straightforward. We know that x is equal to 5. I can change it to 4 and then run it. X is equal to 4. I can change it to 17 and run it, and x does not equal 4 or 5. So this is pretty straightforward. But the question you might get on the exam is it might just show you a chunk of code like this right here, and it'll say, what is that going to print out to the console? And it'll give you some choices. X is equal to 5, x is equal to 4, x does not equal 4 or 5, or an error. So some exams like this are trying to trick you, right? So they might just leave this off, and of course that's going to return an error like we just demonstrated. But most of the time they really just want to prove that you understand what's happening in this cycle here. They're going to give you a value that's going to return something. You have to figure out what's going to happen. And again, with this instance, it's pretty easy. But let's go down and we'll do the next instance, which is going to be our while loop. Now, y starts at 0. I'm going to go ahead and comment out my for loop here too. And if I'm running it, this is printing a 1 over and over and over and over and over again, right? It's going to print thousands of 1s until the program crashes. Now the reason for that, some of you can look at it and it looks like it might be right? Like it seems like it's going to make sense, but I made a mistake. I put equals +1 and it's supposed to be plus equals 1. And this brings up a really interesting point. Programming has to be exact, right? This is the operator that I needed to use. I used the wrong one, and therefore my code didn't work like it was intended. But now, if I run it, and this is another question that could come up on the CERT exam, what is going to print out? And it'll give you questions like 5. 5 might be an answer. It's never going to print out 5. Then one of the other answers might be 4. Well, it's going to print out 4, but that's not the only thing it's going to print out. It's going to print out 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now you could put a comma there, and then when you run it, it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So this is a different output. So when you're reading it, you need to make sure that you understand exactly what it's printing out, because this is a minor change, but it changes how the format looks when it prints. Additionally, you could do y plus equal to 2, and then it prints 0, 2, 4. You do y plus equal to 4, to 4, and it's going to print 0 and 4. Right, so you have some control over the loop as it navigates and how many times it runs. But this is the structure of a while loop, and again, this is the block, right? The block is the print and the y plus equal to whatever it is. This will happen over and over and over again as long as y is less than 5. So if we put y is less than 500 and then y plus equal to 53, that doesn't matter what the numbers are, then you get 0, 53, 106, 159, 212. But you can do more with this, right? So we're going to look at now a for loop, and it's doing z in range from 0 to 10. So the math that we're using here is z squared, right? Remember that the two asterisks basically treated like it's a caret, z to the 2, but it's got to be double asterisk in Python. So it's printing z squared. Now we know that 0 squared is 0, 1 squared is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it gives us basically all of the squares, which is pretty good, but we could do cubes, right? We might not have known what 9 cubed was, but now we do. We could do to the 5th power. 9 to the 5th power gets to be a pretty big number. We wouldn't have known that, but we know because we tested it with z squared. This is another point that's just important in programming. You always want to do a test, or a desk test is what sometimes we'll call it. And this is running the code where you know what the output is supposed to be. At this point, we know how to calculate z squared. We know what it is. So we can look at it and make sure that it's working like it's supposed to. Sometimes what happens is we'll do like 4z in range, but we'll use the wrong variable down here. And then somewhere up above, we might have set x equal to 5. If we run this, then it's giving us 25 every time. And we know that that's not right. But this is a test which gives us a reason to go back and look at our code. Sometimes there are errors that are syntax errors, and that's like what I did with the equals plus. This was a syntax error. The code would not work that way. But this error that I have here is a logic error. Some might call it a semantics error. The code's not doing what I want it to, but nothing is written incorrectly as far as the code is concerned. I've written it incorrectly, but I didn't know, and the code couldn't tell me that it was wrong. So it gives me an opportunity to go check it. So it's always good to do a test check when you're running code and make sure that it is doing what you expect it to do, giving certain inputs. So we'll come back up to the initial if statement. We're going to uncomment it out. Starts off with x equals 3. But instead of x equals 3, we're going to do that int input, give us a number between 1 and 10. So now when we run it, if I type 5, it's going to tell me x is equal to 5. Run it again. If I type 4, it's going to tell me x is equal to 4. But notice both of these times, it tells me the value, and then it just kicks out of the code. Because the if statement is only designed to work exactly one iteration. But if, let me go ahead and comment this back out. Oops. There we go. If instead give us a number between 1 and 10 in this while loop, right? I could actually put it inside the while loop here. We'll say 1 in 1,000, right? This is an example of we don't know how many times this line is going to run. Y is not defined here. Start y at 0. All right, so when we run it, we don't know how many times the player is going to give us a number that is less than 500, right? Whatever number they give us is fine, But once they give us a number over 500, in this case I'll just do 501, then you see it kicks us out of the loop. So when we're using user input, sometimes it's necessary to use a while loop because we don't know how many times the user is going to need to input something to get it to work. But what's also cool, I think I can do this. There we go. All right, so we can use the input here. I am going to comment this out. I'm just going to write a new one. We can use the input here to get input from the user. And previously we used 4x in range 10. And we knew that this would run 10 times, right? We know that. But we can do for z in range x and then print z. So what's going to happen here is it's going to ask the user to give us a number. Doesn't matter what number they give us 5. Then it's going to print 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's using the user input to determine how many times this loop is going to run. Now this is different. As the programmer, you don't necessarily know what number they're going to choose. But once they choose the number, the compiler knows exactly how many times this is going to run. And that's different from a while loop, because the while loop, the code doesn't know how many times it's going to run until it runs there. Especially when you add user input within the while loop. So now I'm going to do I'm going to write another for loop. I'm going to write a nested for loop for 4x in range. Let's just do 4. And then for y in range, we'll do 4 again. And we just want to print x and y with a separator of just a double colon. So what should happen here is we're going to print 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 2. All of these different, we'll call them coordinates, right? Because that's kind of what they are. But it's giving us the opportunity to print x and y and correlate them in some way. But the way that it works, it's going through the x loop, and it starts x at 0. The first time, x is 0. And the first time, y is 0. But the second time through the loop, x is 0 and y is 1. Third time through the loop, x is 0, y is 2. So you'll notice it's going through this loop over and over and over again until y is equal to, or until y gets through its range. When y gets to 4, it comes back up and starts this loop again, and x is 1. But then it starts this loop again, y is 0. So this is a nested loop, and you can nest these as many as you want. This is going to be a really, really long output. Whoops, that needs to be a z. It's a whole lot of zeros, ones, and twos, threes, whatever, right? But you can nest as many for loops as you want. And you could nest these inside of a while loop or nest an if loop inside of them, or an if statement inside of them as well. I got about 2 minutes left. I will make an assignment and I will post it. There won't be a video for it, but I'll post the assignment for you to do for tonight or tomorrow night, and we will go from there. So we'll see you all soon. Thanks.